Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I'm excited to have Ben Ritter on the show today. It's been a long time coming of us connecting, and I'm grateful that the time has come to have a conversation and have you on. Ben, welcome. Thank you so much. Please introduce yourself and let our listeners know what's inspiring to you. What's lighting you up right now? How did you get to where you are? Like all the big questions. All right, your turn, go.
Oh, thank you so much for the warm introduction. I'm really happy to be here. It has been a long time coming. And just in general, I'm just happy to be having a conversation with you because that fills me up, honestly.
Yes.
And I know I'll share some other things, but just for our listeners, a little bit of context. So I have a background in organizational leadership, and I've been coaching for the past decade. I mainly work with senior leaders and executives to help them create a career they can love. So that can be developing as a leader. It could be figuring out a new career path. But mainly, I help people develop the self-leader that's within them. We focus on creating clarity around what they want to achieve, what they stand for, creating confidence and skills, as well as personal self-belief, and then control, really focusing on their environment to make sure that it aligns and it suits them. So that's on the personal side. And then I also am the head of talent development at a life sciences manufacturing organization. So I take what I do for individuals and developing them as leaders so that they can love their job and their career and feel that it fulfills them. And I help organizations become places that people can do that at. Because there is something to be said about if your environment isn't actually allowing you to create something, despite how much you try and how hard you work and how much you show up and how accountable and empowered you are, there are just some environments and some leaders and some managers where that's almost impossible.
Right.
And so I'm trying to hit this on both ends of the spectrum.
I love it. Self-leadership. I can imagine so many aspects in which people don't have clarity, confidence, or control. So it's hard to feel empowered or aligned without that baseline knowledge of who am I, what do I want, where do I want to go? We all need that help.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing the work that you're doing. It, I imagine, spans a whole lot of realm of application in our lives, not just in the business world.
Yeah, and funny you asked what lights me up. And so I'm really lucky that I've curated a career where it doesn't really matter what I do, but why I'm doing something. Like I know what that needs to be. So I'm able to get the joy from it that I need. And I was actually at this lovely dinner party the other day where everyone asked a question, or everyone had to answer a question to create kind of connection. And one of the questions was, if you had to change one thing about your life, what would you change? Kind of a trick question because my initial answer is I am who I am today because of everything that I've experienced. And so I wouldn't change anything. But I understand the purpose of the question, so I'll play along. And I shared an experience when I was in junior high and I was in orchestra. I played the violin when I was a kid. And the teacher, it publicly embarrassed somebody in class, called them out, made them feel terrible. The person was crying. And I had this just gut reaction inside of me to say, that's not okay. I don't want to be in a place where that someone treats other people like that, where a leader does. And I'm not going to stand for it. So I quit.
So really living by your values, even at a really young age.
When I was super young. And, when I look back, I actually probably would change that because standing up for my values in that way actually defeated the opportunity to create those values in that environment, as well as stole something from me that I appreciated, that I valued myself. But that experience, and then I start looking at other moments in my life where I stood up for other people that were being unfairly treated, that I thought unfairly treated in a way that was holding them back or impacting them in a negative way. And I'm like, wow, this is literally the core of what I do today. And so it's like all these, and started reflecting on all the major moments in my life, because I kind of knew what drew me to coaching. I knew what drew me to start my business. I knew what drew me to get into the industry. And it was similar moments, but I didn't realize it started that early. So that when I think about what lights me up, it's like, it is fairness, it is justice, it is personal empowerment and accountability, and giving people the opportunity to create whatever it is they want to create for themselves. And I was sharing this with someone, and they're like, Ben, but you're not like a caretaker. You don't cater to people. And I'm like, yes, I will, but I want to create the opportunity for other people to step into that, like to step into whatever it is that they care about, because I believe everyone has that within themselves. So I love, and what lights me up is lighting the sparks, right, within other people as well, to help them create whatever it is they want to create in their life.
We need more of that light in the world now, don't we?
Well, you have it, right? And so that's why we vibe.
Be the lighthouse is one of my mottos. And when you create that space, it feels infectious, it feels inspiring, and it's I interrupted what you said, and that you live by your values. And interesting how you learned from that moment to correct what the values you were actually wanting to embody, which was to not abandon those hard moments, but to create the change in which I can feel aligned and not have something important taken away from me.
Yeah. And they used to be the lighthouse, and it can be really difficult. And I work with a lot of clients that feel like something is off in their career and in their life. They're high achievers, they're high performers. If you looked at their life, you'd be like, you're one of the wealthiest people that I know, and you have an incredible professional career, and you have this beautiful, partner and this family. You live in this amazing house. How are you unhappy? How do you feel that everything is off? And, I feel like that is a very normal human condition. And we need to understand that it's a normal human condition, because even though you may know that you want to be the lighthouse, but maybe your inner light is dimmed. But that's not usually, and I'd say, well, some of the time it's not the fault of your external environment. A lot of times it's just our own personal roller coaster of emotions. Maybe we're not sleeping right, maybe we're not eating right, maybe it's just seasonal emotional changes. Maybe it's just that time where you personally are in a reflective mode, or maybe low energy, and so the things that you expected of yourself you're not able to do, or you start looking at the things around your life in a different light. And I was very much in one of those phases recently, and the understanding of what I'm capable of, the understanding what my values are, and the understanding of reality, not outside of perception, right? That my reality is different than what I perceive, allowed me to get out of that trough a lot faster. And I think that is something that's really coming up for me right now, especially end of year, where I think reflection and people are saying, did I accomplish what I wanted to accomplish? What am I maybe wanting to accomplish next time? Or maybe I'm not, just in general feel lonely because it's the time of year where everyone seems like they have everyone around them. So it's important to remember those things. And I'm just constantly telling myself over and over again, like, you're loved. I love myself. I'm beautiful. I am successful. This is my plan moving forward. These are all the things I accomplished. And I just want to shout that from the rooftop, because I feel like I'm not the only person here. And I know I'm not the only person here.
You are absolutely not the only person here. And I think you're bringing up something bigger on an even deeper level of definitions of success do not equal necessarily happiness, contentment, and peace. And we've got to give ourselves multiple metrics to say, what do I feel content in right now? And, the time that we're recording this is only a week after Twitch commit suicide. That has, I actually just put out a podcast episode about suicide and my own experience with suicide of my father having died by suicide when I was 10. But when we look at someone like Twitch, who was a very public figure, who was clearly a lighthouse, who spread light and joy in every aspect of what he did, and yet we don't know what someone's internal world is. So how do we hold the space for the and when everything's going great and something feels off? And I love, this depth of conversation, because I'm curious for you. I know I've got some thoughts, but if someone is experiencing, or even in your own recent experience, if you were naming these kind of hills and valleys of our own emotional life and journey, what are some of the tools that you draw upon to even recognize this is where you're at when all the boxes are checked of, wait, but everything's going great? So what for you are some of those self-awareness tips or tools or resources that if someone who's listening be like, yeah, I'm totally in that space too. What do I do? What the fuck do I do with that?
Mm-hmm. Some of the strategies are mindsets, and some of them are, practical tips and such. And so I'd love to hear your own as well. It's heart-wrenching. It's heartbreaking that you don't really know what's happening in someone's mind.
Right.
And there's only so much you can do to try to help as well when someone's struggling internally. And I might just because it was brought up, I ask everyone that's listening to reach out to someone close to them and just check in, say hi, and don't just take, I'm great for an answer. Actually give them a call maybe and talk for 10 minutes. You never know what that conversation is going to do for that person, as well as what it's going to do for you, as it's connection.
It'd be a really simple shift of how are you doing to how are you really doing?
Yep. Yeah. And dig into that layer, peel back those layers a little bit.
Yeah. It takes vulnerability to answer that honestly at times, huh?
Yeah, answer it yourself, right? I've called my friends and been like, hey, this is what I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
And they may or may not respond to it, but I put it out there on the table, and that helps me too.
Sure.
So kind of an easier one for everyone. I actually have a list of things that I do when I'm bored. It's a list of like 5 things that fill my cup up. And when I say bored, it's also when I'm feeling down.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm feeling a certain way, and it's so you have to have this awareness that you're feeling a little off. The first thing is to say, okay, so I feel this way now, and I'm going to change the expectations that I have for myself. So the things that I thought I might need to accomplish today, we're going to change that, because I'm just not in the right mindset for this. And I'm going to give myself a little bit of grace. I'm going to change, like, as you mentioned, the metric that I assess myself by today.
Yeah.
So my metric today is going to be, and I open up that list and I go, read a book, go to the gym, right? Close my eyes and reflect for 10 minutes, journal, spend some time playing tug of war with my dog.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and there are things that I know that are the little joys of life that I've trained myself over the years to really value.
Yeah.
To really value. And when we get in our head and we think that we're unhappy, we think that we're not successful, we need to bring our thoughts and our focus to those little aspects of joy.
Yeah.
Because they bring us gratitude. And gratitude is one of the best defenses against feeling like we're not good enough. I mean, it's funny. I'm a little woo-woo sometimes. I'm like I call myself a spiritual professional, and there's this place like a 10-minute jog away, and it's this ultimate Frisbee course, but it is next to the lake and it's filled with trees. And I'll go there sometimes. Like, I just need to go for a run. And then I'll touch a tree. Like, I'll literally be like, I'll run to the tree, touch the tree, and sit down next to it for a second. And for some reason, for me personally, everyone's different, it helps me feel connected to something greater than myself. And one of the easiest ways to get out of focusing on the disappointment that you have in yourself is to realize, and this might sound counterintuitive, that you're not that significant, that the universe is much bigger than you.
Yeah.
Those are some high level thoughts. I'm happy to go into some deeper ones around clarity and visioning and, future visioning and values and such.
Yeah, I would love to go deeper with it. And I'll add just a couple of my high level ones and we can take it deeper. And first off, I love the woo woo. I hold equal space for the woo woo and the science that backs up the woo woo. I think it's the ultimate paradox of the and, right? We can't get too rigid in thinking that we are all that unique and special. We're all a blip in time. And yet we, of course, are unique and special and here for a purpose and a reason. And sometimes we've got to just take that step back. But for me, some of that high level thing, we can't even get to the acknowledgement if we're not self-aware. Like, so for me, awareness is like the answer to absolutely everything. Because without the awareness, we get flung to whatever emotion we're at, and we think this is who I am definitively. And we get stuck in a tunnel vision of what I like to call toxic presence, where we get so over focused on the present that we can't take the step back to see the bigger picture. And, you know, especially as I teach mindfulness, being present is key, but really the recognition of recognize when you're no longer present, right? And don't get so over present that you're not thinking about outside of this moment. It's a balance of all of what it means to be self-aware. But even just the awareness. And then to me, on the heels of awareness is self-compassion. And for self-compassion, I like to add the words right now to whatever statement it is. This is really hard right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not permanent. You know, there's sometimes these most simple things make the biggest shifts if we remember to do them.
Yeah. I love those. The initial piece, right? You have to start with awareness. If you don't know how you normally feel or don't know how you're feeling, then it's very difficult to notice that something is off.
Mm-hmm.
I have, when I'm not doing that great, I have a daily task sheet that I use to stay on track and things that I know I need to do for the day to feel productive. And at the top, there are two things. It's called the weather report.
Mm-hmm.
1 to 10, I rate how is my mindset? So positive, I have a positive mindset. And do I feel rested? And I found that those two things are the key to really me being, feeling capable throughout the day. And me being okay with who I am. If I'm tired, if I'm exhausted, if I'm fatigued, then I go, great, why? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not positive, I go, okay, why? What's going on? And it allows you to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, that curiosity is
Yeah.
key.
And I love the right now. This is fleeting.
Yeah.
This is fleeting. One of the most powerful things for, and I'm probably sure you can relate to this, is for my clients to do is, other than just working with a coach, and because it helps them understand that this is fleeting and this is normal, but it's to talk to other people that are actually going through some of the similar things.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, okay, this is normal. I am not alone. And this was such a massive release where I've gotten out of my head instead of this cycle of self-perpetuating negative, victimizing thoughts,
Yes.
to actually realize that it's kind of interrupted that and allowed them to move forwards into whatever it is they need to accomplish.
Yeah. In the self-compassion work, that's the common humanity piece of self-compassion. And what I like to describe of my definition of common humanity is, while you are unique, your problems are not.
Mm-hmm.
It's that reminder of, oh, okay, my details are different, and that's my uniqueness, but what I'm experiencing is just simply human. And when I remember that's just humanity riding those waves, then I can take it less personally where I'm getting stuck.
I was talking with a client last week. I remember this specifically because I think it was almost a reflection too of what I was thinking personally. It's interesting how there was like this synergistic mirroring of state. And I was just like, being human is kind of tough sometimes. Like we're hunks of meat and we have pains and we have emotions, and we live in a society with certain pressures and expectations, and it's like this is what it means though to be human in the life that you've curated for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So how much of this is expected and a given, and are you okay with it, or do you want to change something about your environment right now, or how you've chosen to live?
Yeah, it's mindfuck, isn't it? I did a podcast episode a few months back titled Life is a Mindfuck. And previous to that was motherhood is a mindfuck. And there will be a potential one in the future of relationships are a mindfuck. Like it's all just life though.
Yeah.
We over attach to the challenges of it and take it over personalized. But what were you gonna say?
I mean, going back to the sad situation with Twitch. If you looked at his life from the outside in, wow, talk about life must be amazing. And if you are living, and so me personally too, I deleted Facebook. I barely on Instagram other than for some work things sometimes, but barely on it. Don't post, don't engage. I try not to get on it all or scroll. I try, I don't really watch TV or news or anything. Like if you are surrounding yourself with the perfect ideal world, and this is said so much, I just have to repeat it. You're going to have a very skewed perception of what your life is supposed to be like. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd be very curious if we went back in time, or even just let's say you won the lottery and lived on an island, like what would you expect of yourself?
Mm-hmm.
How would your expectations change, taking away what you think you have to do or what you think you have to be?
Yeah. Yeah. It's comparison is one of the things that rob us of joy and presence, right? Expectations, comparison, what gets past the suffering. I want to go back to what you started to say a moment ago, some of the deeper things that also highlight the things that you do in your work with other leaders is the deeper work of the clarity, confidence, and control of your environment. Can you say a little bit more about if someone who's like, yeah, I need more clarity in my life, but where do I start? I need more
Yeah.
confidence, but I don't feel confident. How do I get past that? Like, can you speak more in depth around those areas?
Yeah. So there's four main activities that I usually take clients through with clarity, comes to clarity. And so most of the time when someone comes to me and they're lost and they're stuck, they don't really know what they've accomplished. They've forgotten everything that they've really achieved in life or that they've experienced. And I think this goes for everyone because how often do we sit back and think about our first job or our second job or our first heartbreak? Very often we have lived those things. They've left their emotional toll and they've left whatever changes that they've, created for us, and we move on. And when we're stuck, it pays to go back and really list out all of our defining moments from our life, positive and negative, and to truly reflect on who we are and what formed us to become who we are. Because
Mm-hmm.
then we can, with that awareness, we can start choosing who we want to be
Right.
a little bit more as well. It also allows us to create a spark of that confidence that we're going to focus on later. But so then after we identify our defining moments, have a little bit more clarity on what that future vision is potentially that we want to create. So we do some future visioning,
I love
really
that.
figure out what it is that what you want to achieve. And then from who we are in our future vision, we usually get a good idea of some of our most happiest moments in our life and some of the least happiest moments in our life. So we can start identifying our values. So it's kind of like we're basically putting together a booklet of who are you.
Mm.
And once we have that, once we can identify those values and then define those values for who we are and what they mean for us specifically, instead of just general keywords, and prioritize them, we can then take that and go, great. Now, what do you want to achieve? What actually helps you create this future vision? And how do these align with your values? And so then we actually start doing some goal setting exercises. And lo and
Yeah.
behold, after all that work, it is a lot of work. I'm not going to undermine it. We have a pretty good sense of why we want to achieve something and how we're going to achieve it and who we are. Right?
And who we are. What would you say? And I'm curious because I have some thoughts around this, but I'm curious, what would you say is the hardest part of that, those steps for people in gaining that who am I book or a set of ideas or identities?
Yeah, the hardest part, one thing is getting someone started to do the work because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But the hardest part is probably really questioning the values. So what people tend to write down initially for their values, even after all that pre-work, are not the values that we get to.
Mm,
Um,
say more.
well, I think we have aspirational values. These are the things that we want to become.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have values that we are, but don't fully understand what they mean for our
Mm-hmm.
personal life and for our professional life. And we're not really trained, most of us, to pull back at the layers, and, to ask why 5 times and to really understand what something means to us. And then to look at it from multiple different perspectives. So if we say, oh, well, Health is really important to me. Great. Okay, what does health mean? Let's define it. Wonderful. We've defined it. Okay, tell me more about that definition. Okay, great. So what does this look like in your professional life? Wonderful. What about this? Okay, great. We have that. We've asked, 3 or 4 follow-up questions. Okay, what does it mean for your personal life? And really spending the time to understand who we are, not just who we think we are or who we want to be, and not just to be okay with the surface level definition, which is what most of life is okay with, because people, unless you have a coach or you've been trained in certain introspective techniques, you don't truly pull back the layers to understand what something means to you.
Sure. It's really easy to stay on the surface level and be like, but I have a value of health. Why don't I feel good? Well, is all the areas of your life adding up to be in alignment with that value, with your actions, your mindsets, your habits, priority of what you do day to day?
And where did it come from? So maybe it's an unhealthy value. Maybe it came from from external and social pressures. Maybe you were an athlete and thought you had to act and be a certain way. And so now you have all this kind of like misalignment within yourself because you think you should have this value, but don't really have this value, or this value is defined in a different way that is healthier for you. And so there's just that type of work that people tend to sometimes skip over because there's a lot of value assessments that just cause you, they have you circle a word and then now you have your 5 values and then great, these are my values that I'm going to live my life by, but they don't really spend that time to understand them.
And I also think values can change at our different stages, but we may not catch up with where we're at in our life and maybe previous iterations of who we were, and allowing ourselves to evolve and constantly be curious around that. Because, whether if you're single in your 20s and 30s, let's say your values might shift when you become a parent, your values might shift again in empty nesting stage, different factors may impact, but yet at the core, you probably still have some ones that aren't going to change regardless of your life stage.
Yeah, they might rearrange. So the priorities change. They might maybe are defined differently in terms of how they show up in your life. And maybe some values stay the same, but the way that you align with them change. Like, for example, health for me right now may be running, for 2 hours, a couple of times a week, and playing soccer and doing bands and like CrossFit type of activities. And then as I age, health for me might be more meditation, yoga, more focused on nutrition, cooking. And so a lot of times, some people's major values may just shift in definition in terms of how they need to be applied to your life. And they may also change completely. Right? I may all of a sudden not care about health. I'd be very interested to see what happens in my life for that reason. But it cause for attention.
Yeah.
There's differing opinion in the research of values change, but I think they do shift for sure.
Yeah. And it takes awareness to know that and to get curious around it. I think those are all amazing exercises to gain greater clarity. One of the ones that sticks out for me is the future visioning. Can you say a bit more about that?
A lot of times when we're stuck and in a fog, it's because we want something more, but we've never actually sat down and tried to define what that is. We just sit and say, I don't know. I just think something's off. And so it's just an activity to truly try to understand how you want to be living, less about what you're actually doing. I think people get stuck with, well, I don't know the actual job that I want, or I don't know where I actually want to live. I'm like, well, you don't need those details. You need the general feelings that you're going to have in this life in the future. And then we can figure out, well, what can create those feelings for you? What application of your values might create a certain goal that you can work towards? So we talk about what you want your family to be like, what you want your personal relationships to be like, how you want to be living financially, what you might want to be doing professionally, what legacy you might want to have left, like what project did you work on right before you retired? A variety of kind of like some specific, some general questions to help us get some idea and help the client get some idea of, and also build confidence in the vision of what they want to create for themselves so that we can start building some goals. Because part of this exercise is also to understand that, there are an infinite amount of branches or paths that you can take to get to the same the same end vision, the same end goal.
Mm-hmm.
And very often we get limited in terms of what path we think we need to take because of the paths that we've taken.
Right.
And this is
Or
an
the ones
exercise
that
to help with
we
that.
compare ourselves to
Or the
others,
ones that we compare ourselves to. Yes, exactly. The
or
ones
the
that are
ones that,
apparent to us.
yeah. And also the ones that maybe other people told us we should be taking.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
This has been a big piece of the work I'm doing lately. And I can't tell you how many of my clients, when I ask them the question, what do you want? They don't know the answer.
Yeah.
It is a really simple question and really, really complex because oftentimes we haven't given ourselves the permission to slow down or the space or the opportunity to tune into what do I really want? Because maybe we've been living on survival. Maybe we've just been doing what we've had to do. And it feels like a luxury to ask ourselves, what do I want my future to look like? And unless you know what you want, how do you know what you're working towards? You don't have to see the top of the mountain to take the first step. And, that's, I think, such a great reminder. And I'm reading a Law of Attraction book right now, Abraham Hicks, and there's this great little section I just read that said, if you want to, what is the best way to get from Phoenix to San Diego? And they talk about in the book, if you're in Phoenix and you want to get to San Diego, whether you take a plane, a train, a car, or you walk, the best way to get from Phoenix to San Diego is to be facing in the direction of San Diego. No matter how long it takes you to get there, as long as you're facing in the direction, you're going to get there. And without the knowledge of which direction you want to be facing, you're going to end up in Nashville or New York and then wonder, like, but I'm not in San Diego. It's like, well, without the clarity of at least a general vicinity of what we're working on or towards, no wonder we feel so discontent that we're not where we want to be. But if we don't know what we're working on or working towards or envisioning, I love that example.
I love that example very much. This brings up another conversation I was having recently around just a reflection on this exact topic of people not knowing what they want. And I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but every person I've worked with on clarity, and it's the majority of my clients, they all have an idea of what they want, but they're either afraid to admit it or they're afraid to work towards it. And it does take some time to clear up some of the clutter to get to what it is. But a lot of times, even in that initial conversation, if they feel comfortable enough, you're getting hints of it. And you're like, okay, so I see the clarity. Let's talk about why you don't, because
yeah,
it's there. And clarity sometimes is a lack of clarity. It's just an interest. And
right.
it's the understanding that you want to go explore that interest. Most of the time, that's what it is. And it is a interesting conundrum of, have you given yourself permission?
Yeah. Well, one of the ways that I actually help people guide through this is, okay, well, if you don't know what you want, and maybe you haven't given yourself permission or you're uncertain whether it's valid or acceptable or reasonable, maybe given the context and how you were raised or expectations in your environment. Well, oftentimes it's a lot easier to start with what I don't want. And I actually talk about this when I guide parents in helping teach their kids emotional awareness. And oftentimes parents are afraid of asking leading questions because they're afraid if I plant the seed that my kid might be sad, now all of a sudden they're going to be sad. Well, we're not that vulnerable to suggestion. Sometimes we could be, but if you ask the kid, are you sad? If they're not sad, they'll very quickly be like, no. Now, if you were to say, what are you feeling? They might not know what they are feeling, but they know what they're not feeling. And so sometimes that's a helpful way. And then bringing it back to what we were saying a moment ago about values, you might not know what your values are, but anytime you're in conflict with someone or something, or something feels unjust, or it's firing you up in anger or frustration, it's likely a value of yours that's been violated. So you may not know what the value is, but you know that something there is being violated. So we can, even in its contrast or opposition, get curious. Well, I know I don't want this. This is feeling shitty. what can I extract from that to help me figure out what I do want?
Yeah, where do you feel
So,
drained? Yeah, where do you have the
yeah.
least amount of energy on a daily, weekly basis and a monthly basis? And those are
And
such good hints.
yeah, such good hints. And I have a 4-part journal exercise that I gained from someone who I highly respect, that I follow on Instagram. It's Dr. Edith Eger. Have you ever heard of her? She is, oh my gosh, you've
Hmm.
got to look her up. I want her to be my grandma. She is a 94-year-old Holocaust survivor. She is still an active therapist. She wrote her first book at 91 or 92 years old, and her book is called The Choice. And this past spring on Passover, which was the night that it was her last night at home with her family before they got taken over by the Nazis and taken from their home. As I know you know, but for our listeners, during Passover, you ask 4 questions as a way of highlighting the story of what it is that we're celebrating about freedom. And so she asked a different set of questions as to bring insight and self-awareness into where you're at in your life. And these 4 questions have become journal prompts that I do frequently. For a while, I was doing daily. And I've guided this in clients, and I always credit her because I think they're so simple and brilliant. But the first one is, what do you want? The second one is, who wants it? Gaining clarity, is this what I want, or is this what someone wants for me, or expectations? The next question is, what am I going to do about it? And the last one is, when? And when I've done this exercise, the question of what do I want, it can change daily. But it's getting me in the habit of self-curiosity and insight. But an extension of that is not just what I want, but how do I want to feel? What's my emotional experience or emotional landscape that I am seeking to maintain or attain? There's so much in this one simple question of what do you want and what's the future look like for you, and how do we create that?
Yeah, those are really powerful. I'm looking her up right now, by the way.
Oh,
I'm gonna check out her books and her Instagram and see if I can get a hold of her. See.
I have a colleague who interviewed her, and I reached out to him and said, okay, what did you do to interview her? And he said, I was consistent, and it took 1.5 years. So he connected me with her contact. So I'm happy to share the contact, and hopefully it won't take 1.5 years, because she's brilliant and beautiful in how we choose to live our life as a choice moment to moment. Not
And what
always
do you
easy.
want? I love that question. What do you want?
So,
And who wants it?
yeah,
Such a great follow-up.
yeah, it's
And what are you
beautiful.
gonna do about it?
It's I'm telling you, I did that every single day for at least a solid month. It was just a great practice. So confidence. We have some clarity. If you're moving on to what you guide and teach others, confidence. That's a hard one to get
It's
people
a big
to
one.
tap into. How do you
Yeah.
go about helping someone
If I
increase their confidence?
when I was younger and I was trying to be a professional soccer player, I had this light bulb go off in my head that my mind was holding me back from performing. It'd be so strange. I'd go on the practice pitch, be perfect, and then I'd get in the game and it'd be like I was a kid playing against grown-ups. It was so weird. It highlighted the fact that your mind is such a powerful tool, either to hinder you or to help you. And I went to my coach one day when I finally realized what was going on, because my lack of self-confidence also impacted my not just my mental health, but my physical health. I developed pretty severe eating issues and nutritional issues because of it. And I realized there was a problem. And I went to my coach after practice, because he's like, what the hell's wrong with all you? What's going on? And I go, Coach, I don't know what's up, but my mind is getting in the way. He goes, I'm not your effing therapist. And he yelled it at me and us in front of everyone. And it highlighted the fact that no one's going to solve this for me. I need to. And it really motivated my journey into understanding confidence.
Yeah.
And so I'll pause for a sec. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I chuckled at the I'm not your therapist piece, because I think there's an assumption of where the emotional gets tapped into the physical of our environments, and thinking that such a it's not the job of a coach. And I chuckled in kind of a little irony of that's exactly what his job was on some level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if
Right?
you
Like,
look at sports now, every
right. Very,
athletic team has multiple sports psychologists and
yeah.
performance coaches. And even, I think there was that show Billions, everybody was laughing at. Thought every financial person on that show had a coach. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's much more commonplace now. I think it was a little
Yeah.
before my time. But even in professional athletes, Michael Jordan had his own coach for a long time. So I think it was pretty
Yeah.
common for CEOs, pretty common for professional athletes, but it was, for some reason, it didn't bridge the gap into youth or collegiate and such.
Yeah. So you realize this was an inside job for you to work on.
Oh yeah, and so luckily, I think it raised the issue for me as something to work on, and I really dove into the material on it and built it into my framework, because especially working with clients over the years, imposter syndrome and self-doubt is probably one of the number one things that
Yeah.
impacts the high achieving clients that I work with. And I start with clarity and not confidence, because when you know what you stand for and where you're going, that actually starts naturally building confidence. You can
Mm-hmm.
walk into a room of people you don't know, and people ask you what you do or who you are. And if you know what your values are and what your goals are, very easy to answer that question. A lot of people tend to have public speaking anxiety or anxiety around networking, because they don't actually truly know how to frame or phrase who they are and what they care about. And so we build this natural confidence through the work on clarity, but then we need to take a look at what our limiting beliefs are.
Mm-hmm.
So we take a look at, well, what are you saying to yourself on a daily basis? So what sort of negative or, constructive statements are you making? And so we have to bring our level of awareness to that. And then we work on reframing those and building reinforcing beliefs and behaviors that actually look at the positive aspect of those negative statements. And then we also just look at, well, what are the skills that you need to actually feel confident in your goals? Because a lot of times we will create goals for ourselves, but need to work on something to actually achieve those goals. For example, if you want to become a coach, are you studying coaching? Are you listening to podcasts? Are you reading books? And so sometimes we wonder, well, why am I not confident? It's like, well, you haven't put in the work to actually go learn something. So there's a actual technical skills training piece, of confidence, and then there's the personal piece. So self-efficacy, right, and self-esteem, I think, is the two types of confidence that relates to.
I love that. The last piece of your framework is control around your environment. Say more about that.
Yes. So control is, can you show up despite whatever's happening in your life and stay consistent to your values and still believe in yourself? So when the house is burning, right, how are you reacting? Or do you understand that being in a burning house is not positive for you? So it's one, being stable in your environment, but also understanding that it's very difficult to be stable in an unstable environment. So we focus on close relationships. We focus on just overall, like the orbiting relationships, who you engage with, what your daily life is like, right? What you wake up to, what you go and spend your time around, what you listen to ensure that you are creating an environment for yourself that makes it easier for you to be in control and to work towards the things that you care about.
It seems so simple, Ben. And yet,
right? Yeah.
it's simple, but it's not easy. That's what I always say.
Yeah, even stepping out of our comfort zones of our network is incredibly difficult for people. It's I don't have permission to reach out to that person.
Yeah.
I don't have the time to go form these relationships. A lot of control is actually about who's in your network and who's in your immediate environment. And so we have to learn some skills on how to build those relationships. But most of the time, we just have to deal with the discomfort of putting ourselves supposedly on display or asking something for something. A lot of times we feel like we're taking, when in general, just it's how we perceive networking and outreach and relationships.
Yeah. If I sum up so much of what we said, and I don't want to oversimplify or distill it down to just one thing, but as I kind of just reflect on our past hour of having this beautiful conversation, one of the biggest themes that comes up for me is you don't have to stick where you land, right? Whether you're in the hill or the valley, like it's all fluid, whether it's our mindset, our confidence, like there's so much fluidity in our experience. And yet to fundamentally believe that we can build the muscle through curiosity, open-mindedness, hard work, effort. I mean, if I want flat abs, I'm not going to get them from just sitting here thinking about the fact that I want flat abs. I actually have to physically go do something different to make a change. And it can be so easy to take, just one snapshot of our lives and say, okay, that's it. That's who I am. Just accept. And then whether it's suffer or be discontent or unhealthy in a variety of ways, I don't know. I just fundamentally am such a believer in growth and change as possible. And it sounds like everything through which you just described is a way of helping people see that too.
It can be summed up in a sentence. I don't think it's simplifying. I think it's what it stands for. It's, live for yourself, the name of my company. Why is it called Live for Yourself? Because I believe that everyone is personally accountable and empowered to achieve the career and life that they want. And we should feel empowered. You don't need anyone's permission other than yourself, and you should feel accountable. No one is going to create this for you. And it tends to be that our own stories of what we are capable of and what we have permission to achieve hold us back.
The fucking stories that hold us back.
Another episode.
That's a whole other episode. But I think, fundamentally, that's the key to unlock our potential. Because our stories, man, we hold on to those so tightly with an iron grip and think, I can't change. Well, change the story, reframe it, look through a different lens, and all of a sudden now you're facing San Diego again and heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Ben, I so appreciate your time today. I know you and I could talk for hours. We could pick just any one of these topics and just keep delving further into it. And that's also what lights me up. I get so excited. This is why I do the podcast, is just really the ability to have conversations that excite me, light me up, help me connect with aligned people, and have the hopes that it inspires others to do the same. So thank you so much for sharing your tools and your wisdom and your vulnerability and your honesty. And how can people find you if they want to hear more or listen to your podcast or do work with you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on. If you want to find me, you don't have to be facing any specific direction other than maybe go to LinkedIn and type in Dr. Benjamin Ritter and I pop up. You can also go to liveforyourselfconsulting.com. All my podcasts, my media, information about coaching services, free guide to creating a career you love are all there.
Wonderful. Well, be well. I look forward to our paths crossing again. Thanks so much for being here.
And thank you again.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.